It doesn't exactly matter how hard we work. What matters is how much money is left at the end of the year. And some of you might be feeling like, hey, I've worked harder than I ever have all year. I'm proud of the work I've done. We've got 5-star reviews. We got happy customers, but I get a knot in my gut when I look at the bank account balance. And that's exactly what I want to be covering on today's session. I know for me, it can sometimes be the third or fourth time I've heard something. And for whatever reason, it just strikes me differently. The timing is just right, or the sequencing is just right. It's what's caught, not what's taught. And so I challenge you to get the notes open on your phone or grab a notebook or something and just make sure you write down the thing or two that you want to take away from this session. All of it is just knowledge. And until that knowledge is implemented, it's useless. My aim is to teach you the principle. And whether you're doing it on pen and paper or in your own spreadsheets or in a software program, the principles apply. My aim is to simplify it so that you can develop a bit of a frame, super simple concept that makes sense, that you can then take to all the details of your business and always come back to this frame. Without further ado, let's dive in. Follow along with me. I'm going to tell a story or a narrative that as a contractor, we've all felt this in one way or another. You get your lead for your biggest job yet. You've never estimated a job quite this big before or quite this custom or whatever it is. And you end up sweating for hours, crunching all of those numbers, just having these moments at your desk before you hit send, and you're just not sure. I've talked to contractors where they're literally like sitting on a completed estimate for weeks because they're afraid to send it. Why? Because they're not confident that that number on the screen is the right number. Lack of confidence, which leads to you're setting yourself up to let a customer negotiate with you on that price while you're still on the hook to do the same scope of work. Bad news. So you've created your own spreadsheets. You've done hours and hours of crunching the math. There's always some educated guessing involved. And of course, the infamous question of what would you charge on the industry Facebook groups? I actually do appreciate those questions of what would you charge, because that tells me that somebody that's recognizing that they don't know the answers and they're looking for the answers. Now, unfortunately, it's a question that's not exactly going to get solved in a Facebook group comment thread, but it can get solved relatively simply. And that is the point of what I want to share. The solution, my friends, is to tell a budget every dollar that your business will spend so that it will calculate your rates for you. When you tell a budget, a budgeting tool, which you can do in a spreadsheet or a free tool or in a paid product like SynkedUP, when you tell it every dollar that your business spends, what it will do for you is it gets your rates back out, calculated to the penny, with your overhead and your desired profit margin, and you know exactly what you need to be charging for the work that you do. And that gives you the rock solid confidence that no longer lets you undersell yourself or sets you up to deal with that head trash where you're second guessing and doubting your own math when you're trying to hit send on that quote to Mrs. Jones. There are two ways to screw up this profit in your business, essentially, and this is the frame or the principle that I want to talk about. It's not getting the rates right or the math or missing the mark on the resources in your estimate. And I'm talking about like labor, materials, equipment, subcontractors, like the resources in your estimate. You can also miss the mark there because in theory, I could do all the work and get my rates nailed. That budget knows every dollar I've ever spent. I got my hourly rate corrected down to the penny. But if I bid a job for 100 hours and it takes me 150 hours to complete it, I don't make any money. I call this the profit triangle. And this is kind of the cool little visual diagram I made to hopefully visually reinforce the point of what I'm trying to make here, which is to have predictable profits, you have to have both of these things right. You have to have your rates dialed in, your hourly rate, and you have to have your resources dialed in. This is a cool little diagram I made of what solving the rates problem looks like. It's essentially saying, hey, my cost per man hour is X. I mark that up to generate enough of dollars per hour needed to get my break even. So the cost plus overhead recovery is my break even. And then I add my profit, and there's my customer facing price per hour. This is really the budgeting tool simplified into a one pager in a couple numbers. As long as these inputs are correct, I've solved the rates problem. And I want to demonstrate to you how it's actually working. So let's say I'm charging $60 an hour. And then let's say that I work, I have 5 guys and we work 10,000 man hours a year. That equates to $175,000 a year in field labor costs. And I have about 1,500 of those hours unbillable, have an overhead cost, of about $220,000 a year. And I want to make a 20% net profit. What this thing does is it tells me exactly what my cost per man hour is, what my overhead recovery per hour is, what my profit per hour needs to be, what I need to be charging per hour. And if I'm charging 60, how much am I undercharging or what I'm undercharging by the season. And what I want to highlight, the reason I pulled this up and got away from my slides for a second is I wanted to highlight how even a tiny problem, how big that can become in the context of a whole season. Let's say my insurance went up and now instead of $250,000 in overhead, it's $260,000. I just went from a $25,000 a year loss to a $39,000 a year loss, but my man hour rate only changed by, was it $1.20 something like that? So even just by undercharging $3.97 an hour, but I work 10,000 hours a year, that is the cost of me undercharging. Pause and just let that sink in at, even if you're undercharging $1 an hour, how big of a problem that is for you over the whole season. I mean, $39,000, you could go buy a nice used truck for that. And inside of SynkedUP, when you're doing this in the budgeting tool, essentially, instead of the ultra simplified inputs, like the round numbers, when you're inside of SynkedUP's budgeting tool, you're telling it every little thing. Instead of me typing in the labor costs, I'm telling it, Joe works for me, his hourly wage is this is how many hours a year they work. I put in all the numbers, and it's summing it up to say, okay, your annual cost of labor is this. And then my materials and my equipment, which I have in my overhead, all my subs, all my overhead, every dollar my business spends is in here. So this is the detailed granular view. And what it produces is exactly what I have to charge per hour. There's a degree in which sitting down to build a budget feels so like, oh, this is not what I envisioned myself doing on a Monday night when I decided to start my business. Like I wanted to go out there and do the work and have fun and have the freedom and the autonomy. But what I'm saying is after you get past all of the ugly part of having to painstakingly put in all of your equipment into a budget and that kind of thing, this is the fun part. After you've looked at your historical spend for what, what do I spend money on? I looked at my bank account statements or my P&L, and I just put into budget every dollar my business spends today and all the equipment I have and all the employees I have. After I put all of that into the budget, that's my I looked at my history to determine what I'm going to put in the budget. Now let's flip, put on new glasses and look to the future. Let's budget for the business we want to be, not for the business I was yesterday. If you want to make that new hire, if you want to buy that new truck, if you want to get that tilt rotator, put it in the budget now. And then go bid your jobs using the rates that budget gives you. And if you can sell the work, bingo. There's your permission to go spend the money, to go buy that thing that you wanted. This is what living life by design looks like. Design the business of your dreams. If you want the thing, put it in the budget and then focus on developing your salesperson skills to be able to sell to the work, to the market. Because the excuse that I can't sell work priced like that in my market, there is some validity to it, but most of the time it's baloney. It's a cheap excuse. If it were true that you have to be cheap to sell work, well then Lamborghini or Porsche would never sell a car. If a Lamborghini or Porsche salesperson sees a Honda Accord customer walk through the door, they're not even going to engage. They're just going to kindly refer them to the place down the street where they can find what they're looking for. They're not going to say, oh man, maybe I should try to figure out how to get this Lamborghini down into a Honda Accord budget. You can't build and produce and build the infrastructure in your business with the expensive equipment and skilled labor to build high quality 5-star products and service and pay for it off of Honda Accord budgets. It's like picking your market and then building your infrastructure and your team and your business all around that market and serving that niche. If you try to be all things to everybody, on one end, you're going to have people telling you that your competitors are half the price as you are, which is true. On the other hand, you're going to be missing out on some really fun, highly profitable work. The message here is decide who you want to be. Design the business you want to be and focus on developing your salesperson and marketing abilities to go find those people that will say yes. And if you get a lead and they're going to tell you no, you want to get to that no as fast as possible so you can turn and focus on so you can avoid wasting their time and you can turn and focusing on finding the next lead that will say yes. I hope that you guys totally crush it in 2025. If you want to come back to our team and book a call, you can just go to our website at synkedup.com and book a call straight from the website there. And you can connect to us that way, or even just chat us on our website. You can just connect to us there. Thank you for coming. Cheers.